So whenever they're born, they're teeny tiny. They're about the size of a jelly bean, and then they will crawl into mom's pouch, and everything they need in there, or everything that they need, is in there for about the next 5 to 6 months. So they won't even really stick their head out or start hopping around until they're about 5 or 6 months old, and then they'll hop back into mom's pouch when they're tired or hungry. So we do have more adult red kangaroos up by the petting zoo, and we also do have a baby animal area up by the petting zoo, so be sure to stop by and check out what we have. As long as the weather permits, we'll have different babies out there throughout the day. And I think that's about all for us, so thank you guys, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for bringing that down to share with us. Hopefully, guys, you'll get a chance to check out some of the baby animals later on today. Now, we're going to start our portion of the show with a bit of history. Lake Tobias Wildlife Park opened back in 1965. That makes this our 57th season. But there are much older zoos. In fact, the oldest one here in North America opened up 147 years ago. Does anybody know or have a guess what zoo that was? You can shout it out for me.
DC.
It's right here in Pennsylvania. It's the Philadelphia Zoo. They opened back in 1874 and actually tried to open up even sooner, but construction became delayed when the start of the Civil War occurred. Now, roles of zoos have changed a lot since back in the 1800s. Nowadays, zoos are focusing more so on things like education, conservation, and protecting rare and endangered species. Some North American examples of this include the American bison that you'll get to see if you take the safari tour, the California condor, and the black-footed ferrets. They were all very close to extinction at one point in time. In fact, a few were completely extinct out in the wild and only found within zoos. With the help of zoos and special breeding programs, they were able to increase captive populations and release animals back out into the wild to support those numbers. So they are on the rise. For example, the California condor now has about 200 wild individuals and another 200 in those breeding programs. Scientists, however, are still concerned about another group of animals, and that is our world's amphibians. Over the past 30 years, frogs, toads, newts, and salamanders have been disappearing. Scientists believe that we could soon lose up to 1/3 of the entire population of amphibians, and we've already lost over 150 species from areas like Australia, Central and South America, and right here in the United States. The top 3 reasons is a deadly fungal disease called chytrid, habitat loss, and pollution. To help us explain why pollution affects them so easily, Brandon is going to walk around with Milo, our giant marine toad. Now, Milo, this type of toad, comes from down in South America, so you won't see this type hopping around in your backyard. However, they have the same type of skin as all other amphibians. And that's one of the reasons Brandon is wearing gloves. They have what's called permeable skin, which means when Milo is thirsty, he doesn't drink with his mouth like you and I, or lap it up with a tongue like a cat or dog. Instead, he sits in a body of water like a puddle, a pond, or maybe even out just on a rainy day, and absorbs his water right through pores on his skin, sort of like a sponge. Now, other things can also absorb through that skin, such as chemicals. So if Brandon had any soap, hand sanitizer, or Windex on his hands, Milo could absorb those as well and could become very sick from that. So that's part of the reason they're disappearing. The other part is the way their life cycle works. They have 2 phases. They have a water phase where they are, well, when Milo here was a little tadpole swimming around, and now he's in his land phase hopping around on the ground as a toad. That means they have access to any type of pollution, whether it's added to the water, the land, or the air. So along with that permeable skin, it makes them very susceptible. There is a second reason why Brandon wears those gloves, and it helps to protect himself from Milo. He may not look like it, but Milo is a very toxic toad. He has 2 large glands right behind his eyes that can secrete a milky white poison or toxin if Milo got upset. Now, if that toxin were to get onto Brandon's bare skin, he would get a red itchy rash, kind of like if he touched some poison ivy. If somehow he were to get that toxin into his mouth, like a predator would do, trying to eat this type of toad in the wild, that causes worse symptoms, things like stomach cramps, headaches, nausea, and hallucinations. And enough of the toxin can even stop a human heart from beating. So those are 2 reasons when you see a frog or toad out in the wild, it's best not to pick it up with bare hands. We touch a lot of chemicals that can be harming them, and there are a couple of types that do have things on their bodies that can make us feel pretty sick as well. So it's really best just to look at amphibians when you find them. Now luckily for Milo, his species is doing very well out in the wild. They're very numerous, so they're not on the endangered list. But as you travel throughout our park today, you will see some animals that we are concerned about because they are on the endangered list. Ones like our Bengal tigers, our lemurs. On the top of the hill we have our gibbons. Out by the giraffes we have our Addis antelope. And right here in this building behind you we do have our cotton-top tamarins. One other creature we are concerned about in the building is the fuzzy one hanging on the tree over here. Now she is not on the list right now. However, her habitat out in the wild is being destroyed. And if that keeps going, she could end up being placed on the endangered list. I'm going to see if she wants to wake up for a little snack, and Brandon's going to tell you a little bit more about her.
Alright, so this is Chewy, and Chewy is our two-toed tree sloth. They live in the rainforests of South and Central America, and there is another kind of sloth down there, and that's the three-toed tree sloth. As you can imagine, the difference between them is pretty easy to tell. A two-toed tree sloth is going to have 2 toes in the front feet and 3 toes in the back 2 feet, whereas a three-toed tree sloth is going to have 3 toes on all 4 feet. There is one other slight difference, and that's the time of day that they're awake. Chewy and all of the two-toed tree sloths are nocturnal, which means that they sleep during the day and they're awake at night. And the three-toed tree sloths are like us, we're called diurnal, which means that we are awake during the day and we sleep at night. But even though they do have these cycles, their sleep schedule is a little bit different from ours. They can sleep anywhere around 15 hours a day. So they sleep a whole lot more than we do. Now, Chewy may end up getting up for us. We hope she does, because she's pretty cool to watch crawl around. But when she comes up through the tree, you're going to notice that she hangs upside down. And she's going to spend her entire life that way. And her body is perfectly adapted to live like that. Her hair is the first thing you're going to notice. And it's actually going to start on her belly and part in the middle of her stomach. And then it's going to grow down and it's going to fall off of her. Now this helps to keep her dry out in the wild. Since she does live in a rainforest where it rains a whole lot, when that rain hits her belly, it's going to flow down her body with her hair. And it's going to help keep her a little bit dry, rather than if her hair was the other way, the water pooling in her hair. Now the other way that she's adapted to living upside down is with her backbone. Her bones in her back are actually very rigid, and it helps to keep her supported when she's hanging upside down all the time. And all of her internal organs are laid right along that backbone to keep them in shape as well, and they work a lot better in that position. Now, it looks like Chewy's being stubborn today, isn't going to get up for us. After the show, and later on in the show, if she does get up, you're going to see her climbing around all over the place. And if after the show you're up by the fence looking at her, we ask that you don't reach out to touch. She has a bit of an attitude since she sleeps so often, and she has a very long reach and 4 very sharp teeth. So we don't want anybody getting bit, so if she's up and about, we ask that you can take pictures, but just please don't touch.
Alright.
Now the other thing that you'll be able to see if Chewy gets up is her coloration. She is a very light brown color today, but out in the wild it's very different. Since they are so slow, they let mosses and plants actually grow in their hair. And that sounds kind of gross. I certainly wouldn't want plants in my hair. But it works really well for Chewy. It's going to actually change her color to a dark brown or a green tint, and that's going to help her to stay camouflaged when she's up in the canopy of trees. And when she's up there, she's going to blend in really well. But something like a harpy's eagle or a Burmese python could still find her and try to eat her as a meal. And if that happens, Chewy may end up falling out of her tree. And when we think of sloths, they're always in trees, so being on the ground is not good for them. If they hit the ground, they have to flip over on their bellies and do an army crawl to get around the forest floor. They have no muscles in their arms or legs to hold themselves up like another animal would, so they have to crawl around until they can get back to a tree and climb back up into the canopy. But Chewy here lives over water, and that's not too bad. With all the plants and fruit that they eat out in the wild, and here at the zoo, they have a lot of gases in their system, so they float really well, and they can do a bit of a doggy paddle to get around the water, so they can get back up. But if she were to fall down here, she's going to want to be pretty careful. Her downstairs neighbor, Thelma, is down there waiting for her. And Thelma is an alligator snapping turtle. Thelma here, her kind, comes from the southeast regions of the United States. But we do actually have another kind of snapping turtle here in Pennsylvania. That is the common snapping turtle. And I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with them. They're all over the place. But there are some pretty distinct differences that I want to talk to you guys about. And there's a little paper down here on the tree next to Nicole that you guys can check out after the show. But I want to talk to you about some of these differences right now. The first thing that you can notice is Thelma's head. Thelma's head is very, very large, and she has a very short neck. So when she reaches that head out, she can only reach a small area right in front of her. On a common snapping turtle that's around here, they have a much longer neck and a smaller head, so they can reach that neck and stretch it all the way around their shell, hitting almost any spot in the shell to keep that clean. And speaking of the shell, Thelma's shell has these very large ridges hanging down the back of her shell. And that's actually where she gets her name, because it kind of looks like an alligator. On a common snapping turtle, their shell would be extremely smooth and wouldn't have any of this dark coloration. Then the last difference, and probably the most noticeable, is the size. A common snapping turtle is only ever going to get to somewhere around 60 pounds, with a record being about 75 pounds. But Thelma here is already 92 pounds. So she is a very good workout for Nicole to lift up and down all day. But she's not even done growing yet. They have the capability to reach about 150 pounds, and a record being about 250 pounds. So if that's the case, Thelma could potentially triple in size, and I think we're all going to have to triple our time in the gym so we can keep picking her up.
Oh
Now,
boy.
since they are so heavy, they have a pretty cool way of finding their food out in the wild. They don't do a traditional hunting. They're actually what's called a sit-and-wait predator. When they want to eat food, they're going to sink to the bottom of whatever body of water they're living in, and they'll let mud and plants cover up their shell, and they're going to open their mouth nice and wide, and they have a small pink appendage on the front of that tongue that's going to wiggle around, that's going to look like a worm. So that's going to draw fish and frogs into Thelma's mouth, and once they're there, she can simply snap her mouth shut, and she has herself a meal. Now, one last thing for these guys is their age. Here at the zoo, Thelma here is about 14 years old, but we don't know how old she was when she came to us. But we do know in captivity that these snapping turtles can live around 70 years. But out in the wild, we're not sure how old they can get. There was once one recorded down in the southeast United States that had the remains of musket balls embedded in its shell. When scientists dated those musket balls and the turtle, they found out the musket balls were from the Civil War, and that turtle was around 110 years old at the time. So getting that age is a good age for any animal out in the wild. Now I'm going to let Nicole come back up here and talk to you about some of our Slytherin friends.
Alrighty, how many of you guys like snakes? Do we have any snake fans? Oh, I see lots of kids' hands. How many of you guys don't like snakes? Anyone not too fond of them? Oh, only a couple hands. I guess we didn't have too many people pick the wrong building today. We're going to talk about some snakes next. We're going to start off with this little one right here. This is Monty, and Monty is our African ball python. Now they get the name ball python because if he was frightened or nervous, he would curl his body into a very tight little ball and tuck his head right into the very center to protect himself. All pythons are found throughout Africa, Asia, and Australia. With the ball python being a relatively small type, they reach an average of 4 or 5 feet long with a record of about 6 feet. There are much longer snakes. The record is held by a type of python called the green reticulated python from Southeast Asia. There was one that reached a record length of 33 feet long, which is about the length of this entire glass wall right here in front of you. Coming down our center aisle, Amanda is bringing Diego, and Diego is our boa constrictor. Boas come from a different part of the world than pythons. They're found in Central and South America. They don't grow as large as pythons. The record for them is about 18 feet long. However, anything over 10 foot is considered a pretty good sized boa. Pythons and boas have something in common. Neither one is venomous. They are what we call constrictors. That means when they're hungry, they latch a hold of prey with little teeth just to hang on, quickly and tightly wrap their bodies around the animal and begin to squeeze tighter and tighter. They're not actually suffocating the prey, they're cutting off the blood flow to the animal's brain, subduing it a whole lot faster. Then they swallow the animal entirely whole, and usually with the head going first. No matter how large that boa there gets, they really don't like to eat anything bigger than about a medium-sized animal, the size of a chicken or possibly a rabbit. But pythons, the larger a python grows, quite often the larger their meals will become. There was a report of an 18-foot African rock python seen attacking and eating a fully grown leopard, swallowing the entire leopard whole with very little damage. Now you may be wondering how that's possible. Snakes have pretty small heads in comparison to the size of the snake, we could actually open up and swallow an entire watermelon whole. Now they have to be careful what they try to eat, because sometimes snakes eat things with very sharp horns like antelope, or maybe even an African crested porcupine that as adults have quills like these up to 21 inches long. If they're not careful, they can end up with antelope horns or porcupine quills sticking straight out of their stomach walls. That probably doesn't feel great and doesn't look very healthy. Luckily for snakes, they have very strong digestive systems with very strong stomach acids made to break down hard and bony parts like quills, horns, and hooves in as little as 3 to 4 days, so sometimes before too much damage is done. Our pythons in the building have one extra hunting tool that boa there does not. It's a small row of holes right along the upper lip called labial pits. They help pythons to detect body heat. That means that Monty here can tell how large and how far away you are just by the amount of body heat, and we're giving off so much he knows we're all way too big for him to eat, and so he's not going to bother with any of us. Now I'm going to give Monty back to Amanda, and Brandon's going to finish up our show with our last animal.
So, out of the 24 species of crocodilians around the world, only 2 of them are considered alligators. The rest are crocodiles. There's the 2 kinds of alligators are, first of all, the alligator we have here native to America, and that is the American alligator. Then there's the Chinese alligator, which is native to Southeast Asia and China. Now they're going to be a much smaller kind of alligator. They can only grow to about 4 feet long, so they stay pretty small, but they're also actually critically endangered. So there's a lot of zoos and breeding programs around the world working really hard to try to help rehabilitate their population and get them back out into the wild. Now Nicole's going to bring up an alligator here, but while she does that, I'm going to talk about their nests. When an alligator lays eggs, they're going to lay 15 to 80 hard-shell eggs, and it's not going to be like a bird's nest. It's going to be a pile of mud and plants, and they're going to, since they're cold-blooded, they can't incubate the eggs. So they let the sun beat down on that nest, and the plants start to decay to warm up those eggs. And if the eggs are kept at 89 degrees or lower, all the eggs will hatch to be female. If it's 91 or above, all the eggs will hatch to be male. And if it's in between, it'll be a pretty good mix of boys and girls, which is usually the case out in the wild. Now this here is Ivy, and Ivy is one of our American alligators. And Nicole brought her up, and she's going to help me talk to us about what the difference is between an alligator and a crocodile. So the first 2 things that we're going to look at are with the mouth. Ivy here, as an alligator, has a little bit of an overbite. Her top jaw is just a little bit bigger than her bottom jaw, so those top teeth are going to hang down outside her mouth, but you can't see many of the bottom teeth. Now on a crocodile, their jaws are even, they're the same size, so when they close their mouth, all their teeth stick out and they fit into nice little grooves, and they give you a nice toothy smile when they look at you. Now the second thing is the shape of the mouth. Ivy here, again as an alligator, has a very rounded mouth. It's more of a U shape. On a crocodile, it's going to be a much longer, pointier snout, and it's going to be more of a V shape. And the last difference between alligators and crocodiles is kind of hard to see. But after the show, we will have an alligator out for you guys to look at a little bit closer and to pet. And we do have the alligator skull on the front desk that you're welcome to look at afterwards. But what I'm referring to is these little black dots all over Ivy's face. They're going to be found on her top and bottom jaw, as well as inside her mouth. But on a crocodile, they're found all over the body. And these little dots are actually going to be called pressure receptors. So when Ivy here is sitting in the water, she's going to be able to sense different movements around in the water from up to 1 mile away. So it's a really great tool that she can use to help find prey out in the wild. Now one thing these guys have in common with crocodiles is their eyes. Ivy's eyes are sitting on the top of her head, and they face out to the sides. So she can see all of you very well right now, and she can see our beautiful macaws in the back, but I'm standing right in her blind spot, so she can't see me. That blind spot starts in between the eyes and runs all the way out in front of them. So if you ever happen to come across one of these guys in the wild and you have to run away, the best way to do it is to run straight out in front of them and just faster than the person next to you, and you guys will be fine. But you really don't have to run too fast. They can only reach speeds of about 11 miles an hour, and it's only going to be for a very short distance. They have a very heavy body, and those little short legs can't carry them too far. But in the water, it's much different. They do have webbed feet, and they have that massive, powerful tail to help propel them through the water at around 21 miles an hour, and they can keep that speed up for a long time. And speaking of that tail, their tail is going to be so strong that on an alligator that's over 6 feet long, they can swing that tail and break somebody's leg with one swipe. So it's definitely good to stay away from both ends. Neither end is safer than the other. That's all the information we have for Ivy. But like I said, we will have one after the show that you guys are welcome to pet. And they do come with special instructions. Ivy's doing a great job of showing you that she can open and close her mouth. They are not taped or wired shut. So we ask that you stay away from the head and neck and only pet the back legs, and tail. You guys will be totally fine. Now I hope you guys enjoyed our show. After you guys pet our alligator and our snake, we do have hand sanitizer down the front there that you guys are welcome to use. Have a great rest of your day at Lake Tobias.
Alright, make sure you have your umbrellas. Everything you got. I couldn't really give applause because I'm holding the camera. Oh, oops. Well. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I yeah, 90 pounds. That's like a lot of my body. Look at that one. That one's fun.
More donkeys.
Are we going up to the petting zoo?
Kid's sister. Gosh. This says do not feed the peccary. Hens. Do. Da. Da.
Yeah, so you can't feed the ones with double fence. But they don't have Where'd Leia go? Oh, you have to take some more food.
The museum.
And then we should go down that way to look at all the bears I know are over there.
Attention Lake Tobias Wildlife Park visitors. There is no line at the safari station for the next safari tour. The next safari tour will depart in approximately 5 minutes. If you would like to take this tour, please come to the safari station located in the hill above the village.
That's a big truck.
Your tour will take 4 stops. Once again, the next safari tour will depart in approximately 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah. We walked up a different way, right? Didn't we? Yeah, we walked up that way from this way. Did they move it? I swear it was like in the middle. The prairie dog thing. Did it used to be in the middle? No,
I just wanted to.
here? Oh, that just wasn't there. Yeah. Hello, dogs. They're not out though. They're hiding. Yeah. It must be siesta time.
Look, it's trying to hit her.
Yeah, look at it.
Well, you get a rough idea. The older ones will be. My partner is on the lunch break, so I'm getting both sides.
Charles and Claire Acker.
This is the guy that found in the park.
Yep, that's the guy.
Oh, this is him here in front of him.
That must be him. Sheesh. The snow leopard was popular with park visitors from 1993 to 2005 before moving to another zoo. JR at his 70th birthday party at the park. Pictured with him is his younger brother Elwood. Lake Tobias, lake constructed in mid-50s. With Tobias Homestead in the background. JR returning from church to chat with one of the fishermen at his lake in 1959. The lake was stocked with bass, trout, bluegills, and sunnies. Early 1960s exhibits that drew people passing on the road into JR's yard.
From there, we have just rolled over. My father never wanted to charge an admission fee. Being
I still don't even, it doesn't,
When I was born.
What?
She asked when she died. I said what?
When he died.
The guy that founded the park.
What did you say?
What?
What did you say?
When I was born.
In 1996.
Yes.
Does it say what happened to the Owen's daughter? Did anybody see that?
What happened to the daughter? She died in 2010.
Yeah, but from what?
I have no idea when.
It said there.
There's.
both sides are touch and feel, you just ask for the eggs that you let me below while you touch them because they're pretty fragile. And guess what, my actions in this, the biggest, flightless bird that there is. We have ours over by the sequence. Ostrich? Yeah.
Ostrich are?
Absolutely, and that shiny color is just the way they got us. We didn't do anything to it. This is probably our most fragile thing here.
So yeah, Lake Tobias Wildlife Park, for me, is a big part of Pennsylvania's history. At least for me, in the Dauphin County region. Seeing how I grew up around Dauphin County. The original concession stand in 1965, which underwent several transformations to become the main hub concession area today. JR preparing the original Safari Cruiser for a tour in 1965. Earn Tobias in front of an early tour bus displaying the original name of the park, Tobias Animal Haven. The park name was officially changed to Lake Tobias Wildlife Park in 1993. This is the 1993 aerial view of Lake Tobias. Giant anteaters. Tobias Hempstead, circa late 1930s.
Whereas the bison is a lot softer. This is also bison fur. We have some. This is the more traditional color. This is also bison. And that's from an ostrich. It's actually pretty thick. And that glossy color is just the way it is. Freshwater stingray. They originally come from the Amazon River, and they lose their stinger 2 or 3 times a year. So this is protecting it because it's got a stinger rating all the way around, and it's still attached to the ground. Those are the tail feathers to our toucans.
Which means today, the guy would have been 98 years old today.
They rub it against trees, it can get kind of bloody and messy, but underneath is real solid. But the horns grow within their entire life, and this is from a Texas longhorn, and it's a great example of how there's an inner and outer portion in horns, and it's usually very hard to preserve this, but that's where all the blood vessels and nerves would be for this. It would be inside. You can hold on to that. And then the outer portion is actually made out of keratin, which is hard. So that's the hard This one was pretty old, so it's really got a lot of
You're not supposed to smile.
set them up for the picture.
So you like, they all are like. Yeah, it's okay.
Oops. But oops. Okay.
So where do they put all the names?
That's freaking dumb.
Excuse me, sorry.
Mind the smell.
Well, they're all pretty small. So kind of hard.
Mind the sight.
I'm going to have a challenge with that other one.
Jeez, fuck you right into my... Right, jeez, right. Fuck you right. Right into my... Fuck you right into my arrow. Eugene's still a star. Again?
So funny. Try that with everyone. It's like, come on. Hard to see.
And I just heard golf
But
glitch
the other
from
one.
the beginning. Golf glitched on her out of the game. Glitched on her out of the game.
And it's just like, come on.
And as you just heard, the game glitch on her.
Then she put her butt in my face. Does that a lot too.
Again! Again! Again. So, okay. Where are they going?
I don't know where they're going. Yeah, we haven't seen other stuff, but I'm going to ask them, are you going up to see the line and stuff?
Good Lord, I spent all that time.
Hi.
I can see his head like that.
Must be itchy.
It's like kickball. Someone you kick the ball.
You want to play kickball with them? You gonna be the pitcher?
Yeah, they're gonna bite you if you get in there.
Yeah, they would.
They would cry.
Oh.
Let's play kickball in here. There.
Hello, kids.
I mean, let's play baseball. I don't know what's gonna happen if they actually.
Daryl, you okay?
Okay.
Come on, bub. Come on, boys.
See the bear? See the bear?
Excuse me. Hey, excuse me. Sorry. Sorry. Excuse me. Pardon me. Man, eat some roughage, will you? All right. What about the... Howdy, howdy. Okay.
Wow, such lazy animals. They'll be like,
"Ah,
wild.
Well, they're tired in the heat.
Wild, adventurous kings of the jungle. And then
Being in the heat makes you tired, right?
but they should have used it.
You want to walk up there and see the tiger?
And I'm just about running out of room on my camera here. On both of my cameras. I already ran out of room on the first one, so...
Is that just a giraffe up there?
Oh. Yeah, I think.
Well, the video for the summer vlog, at least for this episode, has to end somewhere, so...
Now it's time for flight.
He must have been tormented, something shocked.
I love this rock over here. It's so great.